If I asked you to show me a sample of your school's curriculum plan, what would you show me? If you're having a hard time coming up with an answer to that question, or you're not sure what you would be able to show me or a parent or an interested member of the community, then maybe it's time for you to start thinking about what's in your school's school-wide curriculum plan. My name is Dr. Ron Fussell, and I'm a professor of education at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska. And I've taught curriculum instruction and assessment to graduate students, all of whom are aspiring leaders in public schools and Catholic schools, for the greater part of the last decade. And over that time, I've had hundreds of students come through my program, and I always start the same way, by asking the question that I asked to start this video. Show me an example of your school's school-wide curriculum plan. And in some cases, I have students who are able to show me some really great exemplar from their school. It's robust, it's built out, it's detailed and helpful for any teacher who's tasked to implement that curriculum plan. All the way to the other end of the spectrum where I've had students show me absolutely nothing. And they'll contact me and say, Dr. Fussell, I don't have anything to show you. What do I do? So to start this video, I thought it would be helpful just to share some examples of what I've seen of things that are not school-wide curriculum plans. So if in your head, your example that you came up with is one of these artifacts, it's something that I would encourage you to rethink. One of the more common misconceptions about what a school-wide curriculum plan is, particularly from the secondary school community, is what we usually see as a program of studies. And here's an example of what a cover of a program of studies might look like. And then when you flip into it, you can start to see what it actually is. And the program of studies is essentially just a listing of course descriptions for all of the courses that are offered at the school. Sometimes these are called curriculum guides, but they're usually the same thing. They're kind of like what we would call a catalog in higher ed. It's just a description of the course, how many credits, if it's an honors course or an AP course. Sometimes it outlines academic policy. But in any case, it's not a school-wide curriculum plan because it's missing a lot of what we would expect to see. A school leader could not reasonably expect to give a teacher who is new to their school a copy of this document and expect them to know how to teach a class just based off of a few sentences from a course description. So this is not a curriculum plan. It's an important document. It's particularly secondary schools, college prep, secondary schools really need to have this. But in and of itself, it's not what we would call the school-wide curriculum plan. Another common misconception is that a set of national standards or state standards, or in the case of what I'm showing on the screen, archdiocesan Catholic school standards, in this case for K through 8 social studies, that the standards alone are the school-wide curriculum plan. And don't get me wrong, standards are really important, and standards identify what we want students in a particular grade level or grade band to be able to do at the end of the year or to know by the end of the year. But we can't expect a teacher to be handed a document with all of the standards with the instruction of just do all the standards by the end of the year and for there to be equity in how students access an educational experience that meets all of those standards. It's just too much. There's more that a teacher will need to be able to plan instruction on a day-to-day basis to ensure that those important standards are met in a way that advances the mission and vision of the school in support of every student in the school. So without that level of structure, the standards really just tell us what it is that we expect students to know or be able to do at the end of the school year, at the end of that grade level. Another example of what a student might send me as a curriculum plan that's not actually a curriculum plan is the teacher's edition, or a sample from the teacher's edition of a textbook series that their school uses. And I have on the screen now a sample of one that I found online, and there's nothing inherently wrong with this. It's a well-organized way of understanding what's happening in the textbook and the types of things that the textbook addresses. There's reference to standards, skills, content. There are some assessment activities, and some of them are quite well put together, particularly the publishing and presenting on day 15 is a great, authentic assessment. But the reality is that this textbook, the teacher's edition, or what the students have, was not designed specifically for the students in that school. Those students may have specific needs that stem from the community or something special about the mission of the school. And the reality that the curriculum plan was not designed for those specific students is the shortcoming for this example. So a textbook is obviously an important tool. I'm not saying that we should abolish all textbooks, but the curriculum plan is greater than just the textbook. The textbook is a resource that will support the curriculum plan. So another example that students will sometimes send me is something from their school's curriculum plan, but maybe it's from a binder that sits in the principal's office, and that's the only place the curriculum plan lives. Or maybe the school's a little more technologically advanced, and maybe it's in like a Google Drive or a network drive or something like that. But it's never referenced, it's never looked at, it's never used as a tool to improve instruction in the school community. So I would not classify that as a curriculum plan. I would just classify it as a document that lives in the principal's office, because as we'll talk about, an effective curriculum planning process is effective in that it not only documents what is to be taught and what's important to teach, but also it serves as a tool for communication so that colleagues across the school community can get together, can review the curriculum plan, and they can determine the best way to make changes for improvement from year to year. Now, the final example of a non-curriculum plan that I want to share is the scenario where a teacher develops their own curriculum for their own class that they teach. So maybe there is a situation where there's 3 English teachers in a secondary school, and one of them says, I'm just going to develop my own curriculum because I'm just going to teach what's important to me. I know, my curriculum is my intellectual property. And I've heard horror stories of situations like this unfold where that teacher will eventually leave the school and make that claim that the curriculum is their own intellectual property and take it with them or destroy it. And that leaves the next teacher and the next group of students with literally nothing. And it's not fair to put that on a colleague to have to figure this all out when they have weeks or months to get ready for the school year after that previous teacher left. Not to mention the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, what we're really talking about here is a school-wide planning process, which refers to something that is embedded in the instructional culture professionally within the school community. So if this is what's happening in your school, where teachers just come up with things on their own and they never communicate, and there's nothing really standard, this isn't a real good way of going about it. So what do we see with an actual school-wide curriculum plan? What is it that I'm looking for? Well, basically what I'm looking for is a document Usually they're online, but I've seen paper versions of documents. Whatever it is, however the school goes about it, it's a document that outlines 1 year of instruction for a specific subject area. School-wide curriculum plans for each subject area are typically arranged into units of instruction that span several weeks each, maybe between 3 and 6 weeks, depending on the content area and what the students need and how things are organized. There's a lot that can go into it, but they are divided into chunks, into time frames. So over the course of the year, there might be 8 or 9 units. Maybe there's 10, maybe there's 12, but there is a number of units of instruction. And of course, that would be for a full year class. If we're talking about a semester-long class, like you might see in a high school, then obviously we might cut that in half. So it's a document specific for a subject area over the course of an academic year, arranged into units of instruction with explicitly stated timeframes of several weeks each. So as we look at what we might see in one of those units of instruction, the first thing we'll start with is what we call the unit's organizing center. And this is where we would find the title of the unit. And ideally, the title of that unit of instruction would captivate and inspire and be something that's intellectually interesting and arouse some intellectual curiosity. We would also find a specific time frame, so how many weeks that unit of instruction will last, as well as big ideas and understandings, which are the enduring knowledge for that unit. So if you think of a big idea or an understanding as something that is going to remain with the student for life. So it's basically the organizing hub around which the spokes of instruction, the individual content and skills are connected. It holds everything together. And then finally, we might see essential questions which capture the essence of the instruction that cuts right to the core of what we're getting at with that unit. So they're essential not just in that they're important, but in that they capture that essence. So additionally, what I would expect to see in a unit plan as part of a school-wide curriculum plan is reference to standards. So I would expect to see curriculum standards for that particular subject area, as well as priority standards. So we can't expect teachers to navigate every single standard that exists for their grade level in their content area and expect a situation where teachers just fly through and tag this standard and tag that standard of instruction at this frenetic pace that doesn't really result in anything. Through a systematic process of review and collaboration, we want to identify those standards that are really essential and really important and make sure that we highlight what those are, and then we arrange the other standards addressed by the unit and underneath in a way that supports. This is also where, if we're working with a Catholic school, we might see Catholic identity standards, such as those published by the Cardinal Newman Society, has a great set of Catholic identity standards. So that might be present as well. But standards, remember, they identify what we want students to know at the end of a school year. But as we plan units of instruction throughout that school year, we need to know which units will address which standards and in what way. So that's why I would expect to see that referenced in the unit plan. Along with the standards, I would also expect to see reference to the content and the skills that are going to be involved with that unit of instruction. And where this gets a little bit complicated is that different teachers may teach things in different ways. So when we're talking about a school-wide curriculum plan and a unit of instruction that is something that will be observed perhaps by multiple teachers. Say there's 4 social studies teachers who all teach U.S. history in a high school somewhere, that whatever is listed as the content and skills for that unit is something that will be agreed upon that all 4 of those teachers will address in the context of their work in the classroom. We want to make sure we're interpreting content and skills correctly. So content or knowledge, that's like the noun. So that's the what of what the students are learning. So things like vocabulary, rote recall information, names and dates and places and that kind of thing, definitions of things. These are all examples of content knowledge. And then skills, on the other hand, are verbs. So they're the things that we will expect students to do. So if I were to use an analogy of coaching, I used to be a little league baseball coach, and I could coach my players in a way that they learn how to field the ball in different scenarios. They learn what size bat to use given their height and all of that. They learn the rules of the game. They learn the unwritten rules of the game. That's all knowledge. But then when we get to this is how you swing the bat, and this is how this is how you grip the ball when you're pitching a fastball versus a curveball or whatever, and we get into those specific action-oriented items. Those are skills. So we want the curriculum plan and the unit description to articulate the content knowledge and the skills that will be held in common for all of the teachers that teach that unit of instruction to their students in their classrooms. So along with content and skills, I would normally expect to see some level of explanation as to what resources will be used to support instruction if appropriate for the unit and the content area. So, for example, if it's a science unit and it requires a lab, what are the resources that will be required in that lab setting so that students all get the same kind of experience? And this is not to say that teachers couldn't bring in additional resources or other things on their own to diversify or to modify what's going on in the classroom for the best needs of their students or the best interests of their students. But rather, it just articulates that baseline of what we expect to see from classroom to classroom or from teacher to teacher, so that there's a level of continuity and consistency across that level from year to year, unless and until deliberate changes are made to the curriculum plan. And then finally, the last thing I would usually expect to see in a unit plan for a school-wide curriculum plan is some articulation of what the common assessment approach or common assessment strategies will be. So I put it last, but there are some processes for curriculum design that actually start with the assessment. So if you think about like understanding by design is a popular way of going about planning units of instruction, where the premise is that we begin with the end in mind and we start with what do we expect to see from students at the end for them to signal to the teacher that they have acquired the essential skills and content and learnings and understandings required of the unit, and then to develop the other stuff around that and to support that. But in terms of alignment, which I'll get to in a minute, I put it last because I think it helps to illustrate the alignment piece in more detail. But in any case, we want the unit to explain on some level what the common approach to assessing students will be. And again, this is not to say that different teachers can't do other things on their own. So maybe it's a fifth grade social studies class and there are 3 teachers. One of them has a really great approach where they use technology and it's really immersive, and maybe they're encountering other students from other places to learn about different perspectives, and there's an assessment attached to that. And then maybe in classroom B, there's a great service learning project that's equally as rigorous, and that's fine too. And maybe teacher C does something else that's great and awesome. We want to provide teachers with the flexibility to teach in a way that plays to their strengths, but we also want to have on our radar that there should be a common way for us to be able to assess students across the board. So there should be some level of outline as to what those assessments will be. So I've been very intentional about presenting this in some general terms, because if you were to go and look at what schools that do curriculum planning well, what they produce and what their curriculum plans look like, they're all a little bit different. And that's okay. Different schools are different. Different leaders have different approaches to planning. And it's fine that there's not one uniform monolith way of going about this process. But what I like about what we've presented here and what we see here is that they are the things that I typically see in well-developed plans. And when we think about a curriculum plan and a unit description or unit plan in these terms, we can really start to get at that concept of alignment. So if you're an instructional leader or an academic leader, as a principal or a dean of instruction or a department chair, you can, or even as a teacher, you can start to see how things are or are not aligned with each other, from the organizing center, title, time frame, big ideas, essential questions, through the standards, through the other stuff, all the way to the assessment process. So there's a lot there, even just one unit description, there's a lot there to unpack. And all of a sudden, this abstract process of trying to understand what goes into instruction for a particular topic or theme in the classroom, it's now more concrete, and teachers can look at it and they have something to talk about. And that's why schools need to have this process. So as we close out this video, I just want to leave you with 5 important takeaways regarding a school-wide curriculum plan. And the first one is that the curriculum planning process is just that. It's a process. This is not about generating a document. I've been on plenty of school accreditation visiting teams where the visiting team gets there and the school shows you this great whiz-bang curriculum plan that once the team leaves, that plan gets put on a shelf, never to see the light of day again until the next accreditation visit. So that's not really the spirit of what we're talking about here. So curriculum planning is an ongoing process, and the document is what provides for really structured, intentional, and productive conversations about what's being taught and how it can be improved. So additionally, we see the curriculum plan as a way to identify gaps and redundancies in the curriculum. Heidi Hayes Jacobs, who is the great mind that came up with this idea of curriculum mapping, talks a lot about the concept of the apple, and that in elementary schools, a lot of times every grade does some kind of unit on the apple. But when there's no communication, the first grade team doesn't know what the second grade team is doing, and they don't know what the third grade team is doing. We keep doing the same thing over and over again. So with a documented plan and a process in place, we can begin to analyze those things and look for redundancies and gaps and opportunities to address things in different ways and make better use of the time that we have available to us instructionally. Additionally, we can use the curriculum plan and the corresponding planning process to identify instances of parallel instruction and opportunities for interdisciplinary instruction. So parallel instruction is when you have 2 teachers in different content areas who are addressing a similar topic within the context of their subject area. They may not know it, but it's happening at the same time. It's happening in parallel. So we call that parallel instruction. And then we have interdisciplinary instruction, where it's another level higher, and it's where teachers will actually collaborate and identify ways where they can work together to tackle similar themes across different content areas and classrooms, so as to really drive home for students the importance of that theme. So the curriculum plan and the planning process helps us to identify those areas of parallel instruction and opportunities for interdisciplinary instructional planning. And then finally, there's the accountability piece. If you're an instructional leader and you have a documented curriculum plan, now you have something when you go into classrooms and you take a look at what's going on, you can get a sense of where that teacher is in the curriculum plan, and if they're ahead or if they're behind. And it might open up opportunities for dialogue with that teacher if there are issues. If you're just visiting classrooms and you don't know what the curriculum plan says, then you're really going in blind, and you don't have any way of knowing if what's happening in that classroom is aligned with the curriculum plan. So it's also an opportunity if you're doing more formal and structured observations of teachers, say like clinical supervision, where there's a pre-conference and a post-conference. One thing you can ask in a pre-conference is, where are you at with your curriculum plan? And have the teacher share that with you. And he or she can explain to you the learning activities and how it fits within the plan and how it's all aligned to support the broader objectives of the plan, and in turn of the curriculum as a whole and the mission of the school in support of the students. So that accountability piece is important as well. But in any case, my hope is that this video has provided you with some level of explanation and clarity as to what we would normally see in a school that does an effective job with curriculum planning. And I hope that you take the opportunity to identify how it is that your school approaches these processes, things that it does well, and areas where it might improve in support of the students in the school. So with that, Godspeed, and thank you for being with me as we explore this important topic.